for this workshop, so you will be in the hands of Francis. So Francis is part of this fall project that was presented yesterday a little bit. Today we also talked about the data, and then this is basically the very important part of Francis' mission. Francis' mission is to make sure that data are of good quality. So when we retrieve data, we know exactly what we're retrieving and why we're retrieving those data. And the discoverability also of the data and through the proper annotation without ambiguity, which is also very important. And then, of course, interoperability, meaning that if you do the effort to retrieve data in one project or in one center, ideally, if those data then can be open access, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. So then your data quality is also about the interoperability of the data and for possible reuse, okay? So in research, we are trying to promote interoperability, reuse. Of course, in the clinical world, that's not obligatorily, that's not always possible, because you know that there is so data security, so includes then data protection, and there are sensitive data, so there are ethics questions that are coupled to that. I'm not sure you will really cover ethics, Francis?
Not today.
You will not. So, but be aware that sometimes there are certain limitations and about ethics. Okay, so if you retrieve data, even anonymized, so basically by crossing data, you might be able to re-identify people, to identify familiars of the people, etc. So ethically, this is not acceptable. You cannot do that. When clinical data are put then outside then the secure world, IT world of the hospital, you also need to have robust policy of data anonymization. Patients need to have signed and informed consent so that their data can be reused in an anonymized forms. So some hospitals have this in place systematically. So when you go then to the public system, then you agree with the terms. You basically then agree that your data might be reused for research. But then, of course, the hospital has certain to dedicate effort then to have a good anonymization of the data. Okay, and that's not always the case. So it happens in many university hospitals, but as soon as you're not in a university hospital anymore, so it doesn't happen. Or sometimes it happens in a university hospital, but the informed consent says that the data can only be reused for these very specific projects that will run over 3 years. And after these 3 years, so if you want to reuse the data, you need to recall the patients and then sign a new informed consent. So, which is very often impractical, and then basically data are not used anymore. So there's still a lot to do. But so as far as we go, so then now you're with Francis, who is an expert data scientist specialized in data curation, science, engineering, modeling, analytics, and so crafting machine learning models. So according to the data, Francis is working here at UPF as a PhD candidate. He's also working at InsilicoTrials, which is a company in Italy that has pioneered model and the transfer of model and simulation technologies into reusable pipelines. So keeping in mind the strategy of the digital twin. And I think this is it. So now, Francis, I leave it up to you.
Thank you very much for the comprehensive introduction. Welcome to the Human Digital Twin Summer School in Barcelona. I know most of you are really eager to hear about the digital twin. So with me, I present a solution for actually approaching digital twins that is based on all the data that you can collect about a person, to be more specific, healthcare data. And I present a data governance strategy based on this specific standard. So I will structure my talk into 4 different general areas. So we'll first of all get a background of what biomedical research data entails. Then we will explore its heterogeneity. We will try to tackle this heterogeneity using various semantic models, the most popular being taxonomies. And then that is just the knowledge level. When we get to the data level now, we will do creation of ontologies and do ontology integration into knowledge graphs. Then thereafter, we might look at using different AI methods to be able to manage this data. The first one for getting answers about our data repositories in various different contexts using retrieval augmented generation. And then we are looking to now use AI agents to be able to automate the whole data management process. So biomedical research data generally is composed of clinical data. It's like vital signs, laboratory tests. This come in CSV, JSON, DICOM. We have biological data. We have like genomic and proteomic information. This comes in like FASTA, VCF files, and all that. We also have simulated data. We have like finite element models that come in STL and INPs. We also look at simulation, AI, or ML workflows, which we also consider data. And there's intricate interrelationships between clinical, biological, and simulated data when it comes to AI and ML workflows. So just to show you the levels of heterogeneity in total. So basically, this is actually based on the data that is available at BMMB here at UPF. So AI/ML accounts for 9.8% of heterogeneity of the data that we have in total. Simulated data, 19.6, biological, 29.4, and clinical data is the highest, the most highly heterogeneous type of data that we contain. We can split this into different thematic areas. So we have blood vessels, we have body, we have bone, we have spine, and we have osteoarthritis, different percentages. Could actually split this and before we even look at it based on thematic areas. So the thematic areas are bone, so integrate data related to bone diseases. For spine, we have research on spinal disorders. On osteoarthritis, I think that a lot of that has been said already. And on blood vessels, we're looking at vascular diseases. So when we look at heterogeneity in terms of these different thematic areas, so for instance, for spine data, its clinical data heterogeneity is 3%, biological 12%, and simulated is 18%. For bone, we also find different numbers, and osteoarthritis having almost the highest numbers. But yes, this is according to the different levels of heterogeneity that we get. Sometimes it's structural, sometimes it's syntactic, sometimes it's semantic, where, for example, you specify a gene, but when we go and search, let's say in the ontology lookup service, we find like 7 more genes linked to it, then we cannot be able to know which gene you meant, so we need to, pinpoint what exact gene you are actually referring to. Then we have format heterogeneity and temporal heterogeneity, which is in terms of time. For instance, for the data that we get from our motion capture lab when we are doing data collection for osteoarthritis. So to tackle this heterogeneity, we employ several different semantic models. The first semantic model is using of controlled vocabularies. So controlled vocabularies are what I just explained right now. I'll give you another better, way of looking at it. So for instance, when you're doing a network model and you need to, get your activitors and inhibitors from, let's say, different pieces of text. So what you do is named entity recognition, and you'll be able to get the, let's say, biological entities that you want to use for your network model. We graduate into taxonomies when we realize we have different classes and subclasses, but this remains at the knowledge level, and so when we add the data level is when we get to the ontologies. And we use now the data governance taxonomy that we propose as the ontology that is used to integrate all the other ontologies into a knowledge graph. Then we are able to have different query cases based on the names of the different classes and subclasses as keywords. Just to give you an example of how the taxonomy for the data governance structure looks like, this is how it is. So we have different folders. We are giving people storage in different folders. So, and we're, apart from the personal folders, which we normally have on a day-to-day basis, we also define role-based access control at this level, where we decide, okay, this user has these rights and those rights, and is able to write at these particular different locations. And attached to that, we have now the taxonomies of the different thematic areas that we mentioned out before. So we have body, we have blood vessels, we have osteoarthritis, we have spine, and all the other thematic areas. So for retrieval augmented generation, this is how we take it. We have a knowledge graph which is composed of URL endpoints of different data points within our data sets. Some of it is unstructured, some of it is structured, some of it is semi-structured. We take a user query, and then we take embeddings from this knowledge graph, put it in a vector store, and send it to an LLM to be able to get a structured response. Then, so this is a good time to introduce that AI agent, which will be an data governance-based AI agent that will do exactly the same, but this time around it will be autonomous. That was just the introduction. I apologize that I did not even say my name. My name is Francis Chemorion. So I am researching the management of clinical, biological, and simulated data for uniform simulation workflows. I'm trying to get present for uniform simulation workflows. This is pure data engineering in translational medicine. So why translational medicine? Because I looked at this in different angles. So we have speed of implementation, innovative solutions, multidisciplinary approach, customized patient care, preventive focus, high patient involvement, outcome-based, and clinical trial integration. And when I look at how they score according to these different dimensions, then we find that translational medicine scores the highest despite all of them employing multidisciplinary approaches or being outcome-based. Now, the biggest challenge that I faced was a lack of scientific evidence. So for example, for our specific thematic area, that is the spine, we're going down to the intervertebral disc. So for example, for the intervertebral disc, there was no evidence of any data collected using translational medicine approaches, but so I went online to do a search. I did my search on clinicaltrials.gov. I would say this because clinicaltrials.gov hosts randomized controlled trials, which are the highest level of evidence that you can find out there. And I found 15 that were related to intervertebral disc degeneration, just to study how data is being maintained at the thematic level. I found a couple of trends. I discovered a couple of drugs. And I saw a gap where there was a huge disparity between the quality of protocols, which means there's a huge disparity between the quality of data that we are actually sharing. After doing that, so what we did is we realized that most of the biomedical data are usually controlled by research infrastructure organization initiatives. So some of the most popular are like Elixir Europe, and using Elixir Europe's, what do we call it, data resources, then we were able to get data management solutions for various types of data according to our different contexts. But one thing that stood out out of all these new tools is that all of them used the URL all of them are web-based if you look closely. So a URL, for instance, has several parts. The last part is an anchor. It has a query string which asks the question, a path which is now the API endpoint, a port which is a port open on the machine that is hosting, presented by a host, which can be a URL or an IP. Then we have a username and password. So just within the structure of this URL, then we can be able to implement data governance already, as I explained in the earlier strategy. We have several other protocols which you could use. It's not just HTTP. And this brought me down, as I was thinking, I realized that the amount of biomedical data on the web that is shared using URLs is only growing. But the question is, how can we find the most useful biomedical information? Can we use uniform resource locators, that is the URLs? And so my hypothesis was implementing standardized uniform resource locators, URLs, for taxonomized and semantically annotated biomedical data repositories will significantly improve the efficiency and accuracy of retrieving useful biomedical information. So, lucky for me, I stumbled across RFC 6570, which is a URI template. It contains the syntax for building URIs and all the different things that you could actually do with it. And so from this, we created the minimum information for a standardized URL endpoint. And using this RFC 6570, then we were able to create standardized ways of representing those. I know the question on everybody's mind would be, but what if the data is unstructured? And because we all know unstructured data is kept in buckets. For example, when you talk about object storage, but to our rescue comes REST APIs and the HTTP protocol, which we are actually able to use. And actually from this, we were able to create a couple of tools. For instance, this one, what it does is integrated into the object storage. That is the Red Stack Swift object storage. So on Swift object storage, you can be able to do, to create, to mimic a folder structure hierarchy by using several scripts that we provide. We actually graduated and stopped creating them just like this. We started using Cookie Cutter, and we are actually giving it out on PyPy, so you can pip install this folder template to be able to assist you to work with data on your object storage using folder structure hierarchy mimicking. But how did we get here? We need to understand how we came to this point. So when you look at the 17th century during the paper era, so management of data was done physically using folders and physical libraries. For example, biological data. This is an example of herbarium specimens, all attached to a book. Clinical data, we have a case report over here, all this on paper. Even simulated data, for example, this one is a Horologian oscillatorium by Christian Guyen, who created a model of the pendulum clock. We can all agree that that was terrible. Search for data, information, or knowledge was done physically, which means you would have to fly, to sail to a certain country to be able to access documents. In the 20th century came abstracting, where this is the mechanical era, when people started using typewriters. So some universities still have these, how do we call them, card indexes for different books. In the 1960s came the databases. So most of our data was now structured. In the 1990s, we had the online search engines. And in the 2000s, now came the semantic web, the ontologies. But now we have ML and artificial intelligence. So we can safely say that we would not be having this artificial intelligence or machine learning era without the semantic web, because it is the one that directly precedes. So I think I got the wrong presentation. And just to point out how we are actually filling a gap. So for instance, this is, so as I was saying, there is a gap which we are actually filling in the market. And this is, for example, when you go to the FIRE website, when you look at the different resources, one thing that the whole consortium, the HL7 movement was unable to do, which we just solved, was using RDF with the REST API. So how do we use the semantic model using a URL, basically? And so for this, we were able to check out the FIRE resources and all of that, and we were able to map it to an ontology, and we were able to create an AI agent that is able to interact with this data. So which means, I mean, there's no other amount of information that you're looking for to represent a digital twin, a human digital twin, other than all the resources that have been described using FIRE. FIRE is just a database schema that contains all the types of data that you can ever collect about a person in a healthcare setting. So finally, we'll talk about how to annotate data. So there are several different types of annotation. You could do text annotations, you could do audio annotation, you could do image annotation. For image, you draw like image bounding boxes, object tagging, image classification. You could do video annotation, that is object tracking, like what they do for the osteoarthritis to get models of the knee. And so I'll give you a case scenario of where data annotation was needed. So for instance, this was our data before. I don't know why it keeps going to the first page. So yes, so this was our data before. It contains a data set that has information about different investigators. It contains like their species, their sex, their protocols, their diseases, and their qualifiers. But so this is how a scientist like you would present it. But this is not. First of all, it's not findable, it's not accessible, it's not interoperable, and it's not reusable. So what we do is create a transformation sheet for the data curation process, and in the data transformation sheet, we give out the current format, and we give out a better format, and then we give out the technique that we use to do that, exactly that. So for instance, that data after curation, this is how it looks. This is because it doesn't matter which data point it is, for instance, sex, then we have a way of representing sex using the semantic technologies that we have just talked about. So if you go to the ontology lookup service and you type in sex, then you'll find an exact identifier to use based on an ontology. So how do we decide beta formats? Why do people use terms and ambiguous names for things? Short names fit better into dense columns. We'll not talk about that. And so finally, so we've talked about control vocabularies, the semantic models which we were talking about, control vocabularies, taxonomies. Now we're going on to ontologies, and if we have enough time, then we'll move to a knowledge graph next. So before you create an ontology, there are two types of ontologies. There's project ontologies and there's domain ontologies. Domain ontologies are the general ontologies that are being used in the scientific community. So for instance, the gene ontology. So you wouldn't actually recreate a gene ontology. It's better to contribute to one. And so we use these ontologies for data integration, for semantic interoperability, for data annotation and discovery, and for knowledge discovery. So an example is this. So this is just the knowledge part. So we have this level. And what we do is after defining the taxonomy like this, now we define the relationships between the different classes and subclasses. And so example query cases that we could have using, an ontology is, for example, this is a network model of a regulatory network. And so the first query case would be like, what is the relationship between mechanosensors and chondrocyte activity? And so we're able to get like a query for this, and we're able to, to create impact because we're able to query data at that level. And so, yes, so we have several query cases. I will share these materials on email after the presentation, but I think this would be a good place to ask any questions. No questions?
How do you index imaging data or audio data? Is there a different pathway for it?
So we have different schema types. So if you go to schema.org, we have different schema types. And so, for example, for an image, the schema type would be a media object. So when you're doing an annotation, then you write media objects, then you put a URI for it. No more questions?
Yeah, we store a lot of data, like you mentioned. We have different schemas, and we're storing a lot of data. So maybe I missed if you already talked about retrieval system.
Yeah.
So how do you because it's such a complex thing, you have a variety of data. You have medical data, imaging data, audio data, structured, non-structured. So how does it make it easy for the user for retrieval of such data? Are there any special techniques or?
So yes, we fine-tune LLMs on the different endpoints that we have for the different types of data. And so we're able to create a vector store out of this, and we're able to ask the LLM questions based on our, different data sets. So we represent these data sets as endpoints on the taxonomy that we add onto the ontology. So that is, in schema, we call it entry point. We define several different entry points, which are all endpoints. It doesn't matter by type of data. So for instance, for structured data, we have the whole API for instance, if we're using RedCap or using Mulgenis, so you have the whole API inside there. And then for object storage, if it's Amazon S3, it doesn't matter whichever it is, whichever the system. So we have URL endpoints of the APIs on the ontology. And then now we are able to ask questions based on this data governance structure that we gave, whereby we're giving different users different role-based access, privileges. So you can only access the data to whatever level of governance you have clearance to.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's super interesting. How do you see this being implemented in the hospitals?
In hospitals. So basically, first of all, we need to do a lot of documentation. We need to do a lot of collection of metadata. So for instance, we would look at hospital systems like RedCap. So the RedCap documentation is quite comprehensive. So we have like, we have like very well Postman collections of the API for RedCap, for instance, yeah? So we create the ontology based on this URL endpoints that are on REDCap. And now we use this data to fine-tune an LLM model. Then we are able to, to ask detailed questions about our data, leveraging the different skills that are pre-trained. So for instance, data analysis, all those coding will already be pre-trained, and it's all based on our specific data that we have. So everything, it brings me back to my discovery. I just discovered that the internet is an object because of the URL. So yes, I objectize the internet. Any more questions?
Francis, I do have a question.
Yeah.
There is a joke circulating on internet. So 2 data scientists talking among each other and say, wow, there are 20 standards for that. This is unacceptable. We need to come up with a solution. And then 2 weeks later, there are 21 standards. So their solution is to have created another standard. So is that something that is absolutely then necessary because of the high diversity of ontological models or applications, etc., that for each new project or each new gathering of heterogeneous data, you need to recreate a standard? Or is there enough standard out there in the world so that you can basically then target one and say, this is the one I will use?
Yeah, now the interesting thing about standards is that they're living documents. So basically there's almost enough standards for everything because discoveries are being made every day. And so the biggest standards are being built upon on a daily basis. And so what people usually do is that they come together as a community and they contribute towards this big standard that is already established and is well tested. So I'll give you an example is the first healthcare interoperability resources. So you could decide, okay, let me build my own backend to a database, a hospital system, but they already have done that and they have gone beyond to define how to use the data that results from that in research. So it is not wise to start from scratch. When it comes to data models, to schemas, to all these semantic models, all of them, it is better to use the ones that are most popular.
Okay.
Yeah, so I apologize, my presentation was a little bit short because it was getting a little bit too deep, but I think this gives us more time for the roundtable.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, well, for the roundtable actually, so basically then we can take half an hour break because we're ahead of schedule because the roundtable starts at 12:30, and so we have someone then coming from outside. So we need to wait for her. Okay. So there's still coffee, pastry. So Francis is around. So if you have then any question, for him about data, I know that there's some people coming from the hospital here. So and they depend on data. So you might want them to catch up with Francis also. Okay. So at 12:30. Then we start again for the roundtable. Okay?
Thank you.